Hello and welcome back to the Book Marketing Tips and Author Success Podcast. This is Penny Sansevieri with my ever awesome co-host, Amy Cornell. And today, this is an interesting kind of break from our usual let's talk about book marketing all the time, which of course we love doing. We're talking about literary agents because we get enough questions. In fact, I was just on the phone with an author before we started recording, and he said, I was trying to shop my book to a literary agent. And I spent a lot of time on that. I didn't have any luck. And so I decided to self-publish it. Let me start by saying that we're not going to talk about contracts because that gets a little bit too far into the weeds. But what we do want to talk about is, do you need a literary agent first and foremost? Why a lot of authors think that they maybe need one and maybe they don't really, who they are, what they do. And, if you decide that you want to get one, how to find them. And we'll talk briefly a little bit about how to pitch them. But Amy, you this idea was yours because I know you put this in our show notes. Where do you think that this comes from? Because when you're kind of our first line of defense when, that didn't sound really quite right, but you know what I mean? Like when somebody reaches out and contacts us, you're usually the first person that they talk to. And you hear this a lot, don't you? Like, I'm going to find a literary agent first, and then I'm going to publish this book.
Yes, exactly. And I think there's different reasons, but I still think they're interconnected. I mean, I think probably the main reason is that obviously those authors are looking for a publishing contract, so that's number one. They kind of have it in their head that these are the things you have to do in order to get, and then this is why we're doing the show, in order to get published, to get a publisher. And I think in the process, which can be it can be long and arduous and take a lot of contacting and a lot of no's, just like getting a publishing deal, finding an agent takes a long time. And so in the meantime, they're reaching out to us thinking like, okay, what else can I be doing that's productive? So they start thinking about their marketing, they're thinking a few steps ahead into the future, which we appreciate. But it's really tough if somebody is very dead set on agent, contract, release, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To kind of skip those steps and go right into the marketing. And I think a lot of people too, we hear from authors a lot, and I'm sure some of you listening can agree with this. You put a lot of time and effort into the book, but there are still a lot of authors that aren't 100% confident that their book is ready, or that it's worth putting out there and that people are going to receive it well. I mean, it is like, what have you said before, Penny? It's like asking somebody to judge your child for you or something like that,
Right.
It's very nerve-wracking. So I think a lot of times too, they think, okay, if I get an agent and they accept me, that's that next level of confirmation I need that I'm on the right path and that I should be doing this. It's kind of like a buffer that, okay, if this person says I'm worth it, then I'm ready to go,
Which, listen, I can appreciate because there is so much, we are in a very isolating profession, right? So we have our own input and maybe the input of our neighbor or our mom or whatever. And, they're going to always support you because they either live next to you or they're your parent. And so to some degree, I think the acceptance of an agent for a lot of authors means that they have been accepted to this very exclusive community. Unfortunately, and again, this is not a buzzkill show, but it's a good reality check. The literary agent landscape has really changed over the last 10 years, especially. I mean, with independent publishing being as fiercely competitive and big, as it is, literary agents have, they get obviously they get inundated with manuscripts and submissions and things like that. But publishing has also shrunk. And it's not necessarily shrunk in yes, publishers have, combined, like there used to be the big 7, and then there's the big 6, and then there was the big 5 in terms of publishing. So there are fewer options for agents to pitch books to. And some publishers, like there's publisher that we've dealt with before, like Red Will Weiser, and they will take an unagented, they'll take unagented submissions. So agents typically go for bigger houses like Simon and Schuster and, those kinds of things. But the other thing is that agents are known, literary agents, much like, film agents and things like that. Anybody with that quote unquote kind of agent behind their name, they're known for their connections, right? So they know what's going on in the industry. They know who is buying what's trending, and they're also always on the lookout for the thing that kind of aligns with that. Because part of the challenge of being a literary agent these days, I think, and just by full disclosure, years ago, like 23 years ago, when I was first in the industry, I did some literary agent work, which I disliked. I didn't really dislike it. That's a strong word, but I kept trying to offer authors marketing advice. And the agency was like, that's not really your job, Penny. I'm like, okay, I'll do better next time. But so I stopped doing it because all I really wanted to do was just give marketing advice. And that was that was not really productive for them. But agents, understand the landscape. They understand what's selling. So for example, like when Harry Potter was so big, everybody was I remember this so well. Everybody was like, oh my gosh, we have to find the next young adult fantasy. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And everybody was on the lookout. So agents, work by specialty, and they also do follow the trends in their specialty. So, if you're out looking for an agent, you got to be aware of what they're looking for. And the other thing, Amy, that I think you and I talk about a lot is that you can't just pitch them an idea. I mean, it has to be really kind of fleshed out.
Right. This is not a developmental editor. This is not a branding person.
Yeah.
And I think to your point, Penny, you really hit the nail on the head. Like, they know what publishers are looking for. They know what the trends are. They know what's going to deliver. And that's probably why a lot of authors, and, it would be nice if you got a yes or a no from everybody you reached out to. But the reality of how many people are probably contacting these individuals would make our heads explode,
Right.
So yeah, so I would bet a lot of them just simply don't respond when they know right off the bat that a book is not matching up with what they know their publishing contacts are looking for. Yeah. It's very straightforward. It's not personal. But, they're not there to sit and, when we talked about that kind of that confirmation that, like, okay, I've done the right thing. I'm doing the right things. This is something that people want. That's really that's not their place.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's not their place. And it's also, as you pointed out, they're not a content editor. They're not there, or a developmental editor. They're not there to help you. Sometimes literary agents will help you to further develop the story, but you got to kind of show up at their doorstep with something that's pretty complete.
Yeah, you got to be 90% there. And I think if they think you have something really spectacular that they know they can sell, if it has a little, a few tweaks to it, then it's worth their effort to do that. And just because, I know this will come up more, but just because you don't hear back from one also doesn't mean you don't have a valid marketable book. I want to say that. This is not the do all end all. If you can't get an agent, that means you need to rethink whether or not to release your book. Like, I hope that's not anybody's takeaway from this show.
No, but you're absolutely right. And I'm glad that you mentioned that, because there are so many books that started either independently published or were rejected, and that had ended up hitting, very big. And I think, much as I've kind of always joked about 50 Shades of Grey, that was a book that started, not necessarily through an agent. I mean, it just kind of started online.
Right. I mean,
And
there's so many. Oh, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Oh, there's so many different readers and so many different nuanced elements of genres and things like that. It's just not possible for publishers to cover everything, you know? So just because you're not right for an agent who is looking for very specific things for a very specific publisher doesn't mean that you don't have a very marketable book with a lot of readers out there to reach.
Right.
You know?
Exactly. Exactly. And, to your point, Amy, I mean, when you're pitching them, there are guidelines on their website, how they want to be pitched. If you have a nonfiction book, you'd better have a really well thought out outline and marketing proposal and sample chapters and things like that. But typically, if you've written fiction, I mean, they want to know the book is done. They'll probably only ask to see the first 50 pages or so. And this is really where the rubber meets the road, just to coin an older phrase and really date myself. But if you tell me, and I've had authors tell me this before, like, well, the story really doesn't pick up until chapter 2, then chapter 2 should be your chapter 1, and you should get rid of chapter 1. So agents are really, I mean, you have to grab them because they just get so many submissions. You have to grab them right from the get-go.
Right. And I think that you bring up a very good point, is that they are not there to do that. We've talked about it tons. A lot of you listening have probably heard some of our media specific shows and episodes that we've done. And we talk about how important it is to align your book the right way and to pitch it the right way. And I think agents are no exception. You can't just toss something in their lap and expect them to figure it out and make you famous. You really, right. I think your point about especially nonfiction, but also fiction too, proving to them that you understand the market, that your story or your book meets a market need. You know what I mean? Like, they need to see that. You need to make the decision easy for them. You can't just send it to them and then say, they're going to recognize my brilliance immediately. I don't need to do any more. This is just like pitching big media. You really have to put the effort in to prove that you understand how this works.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I also think that it's worth mentioning, agents only make their money when they sell your book, which is part of the reason why getting an agent is challenging, because they don't have the time or the bandwidth to spend on a book that they don't think that they can sell. And Amy, do you want to, because we had an incident where an author was getting charged for an agent a while back, right?
Oh gosh, was that the person that was pitching them for a bunch of...
Well, this was in particular the agent that was like, quote unquote, pitching them for TV shows and stuff.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. This person was paying a monthly retainer for someone to, in theory, get them in front of all the right people. But this was going on for months and months without any significant strides made, updates, anything like that. So Be wary. But and when we saw that, when she mentioned that, we're like, oh my gosh, I almost fell out of my chair. So how normal is that? What is the pricing? Like, what should you expect? If somebody is already in the, if they're listening to this and are like pitching agents, Penny, like, what's quote unquote normal in the industry? Like,
what's normal is agents, if an agent is charging you. So years ago, I had an author come to me and he said this agent was charging him, I want to say it was $750 a month, right? To get his book in front of publishers. Honestly, what's the incentive for $750 a month? Hello, for a book that's not published. What's the incentive of the agent to sell your book? I mean, okay, sure. Maybe they could make a whole lot more money. But I mean, it is the craziest thing. And I told him at the time, I said, you stop sending that money right now, because that is crazy. Agents should never charge you. And, if an agent's listening and that's changed in the industry, let me know. But as far as I know from recent conferences that I've been to, agents do not charge to agent you. Because again, where's the incentive for them to sell your book? The incentive is that they, get a percentage of your royalty forever and ever and ever. But I thought that was just the craziest thing that author was told us. And then she cited somebody's name, who apparently works at Netflix or something, who's considering it. And I was like, this is just great. This is the crazy.
I know, right? That's doubling down on the dishonesty, in my opinion, when you start throwing around fake things.
Yeah, it was all I could do not to reach out to this agent and go, you're
we see you.
We see you. We see you. You're cheating authors. Stop it. Just stop it.
Yeah. Well, then go ahead.
No. Go ahead. I was done with my rant.
I know. Well, to that point, then, now that we've talked about a couple scary stories, what do you recommend if somebody listening is still like, nope, I'm still going to do it, which more power to you. If we have not caused you to just like rock in a corner by now, then you are my kind of people. But how would you recommend authors go about potentially finding a legitimate agent, or what kind of connections do they need to start making to ensure they're talking to the right people?
I would recommend go to writers' conferences. Writers' conferences, typically, any of them that I've been to, and I've been to a lot of them, they vet their speakers. They're very careful about making sure that they have ethical people at their, because it's a representation of who they are as an organization. But many times they will have literary agents there, and you can usually check online to see what kind of books that they take in. If yours fits in that, then that conference might be a good one for you to attend, because many times they will have opportunities for you to pitch those agents. And I will tell you, you learn a lot. Those one-on-one pitch sessions with an agent is where you sit down and you share your quote unquote elevator pitch of your book, and be sure to be really succinct. I mean, I can't go back and listen to our elevator pitch podcast if you're planning on doing this. And the agent will give you feedback like, yes, this interests me. No, it doesn't. Most of the time, the agents are really, really, really good about giving some solid feedback to the author. And I will tell you right now, listen, take note, because they know their stuff. But that's a good place to find agents. Another thing, you could check Publishers Marketplace too, which is an industry online portal. It's paid, and I want to say it's like $19 or $20 a month. And they also talk about who's agenting, what and who sold what, and that also kind of gives you an idea of trends. But writers' conferences in person, right? I don't feel like you get the same vibe online. And then, if neither of these are an option for you, if you're like, I don't want to spend, I don't want to join Publishers Marketplace and I don't want to go to writers' conferences, then, I mean, you could just pitch agents via their website, obviously, but that's much more of a cold, that's a cold pitch. And that's it's going to take up a little bit longer, and it may be a little bit harder to get noticed. And that's just my take personally.
Right. And that's when you have to be wary of when they counter with, well, here's my terms, here's my fees, all those kind of stuff. So don't stop at the first person that responds if you are just cold pitching agents, because you want to get a feel for what's out there and what's available to you.
Right. And then the other piece to consider too is that agents do need some time to sell your book. And that time can be anywhere from 6 months to 9 months, and some cases longer. It depends on what's going on in the marketplace, right? But I think
that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean,
I hadn't thought about that, Penny. If you have something, sorry, that just hit me when you said that if you have something really timely, especially if you're writing nonfiction or something that is certainly not evergreen, or you're writing about something very relevant in your industry now, but you can't guarantee it will be a year from now, I think that's also something to consider, right?
Yeah. Yeah, because even if, and that's part of the lure of independent publishing too, right? Is that you can get it to market quickly. And that works very well for my books in particular, because if I had to wait 18 months for my Amazon book to come out, I'd already have to, you know what I mean? That's a problem, right? I'd already have to write it. But if you are, consider that an agent needs time and then the publisher needs time. So sometimes sometimes you might be waiting, 18 months to get your book in the system only because publishers buy books well ahead of their release date. I mean, they can drop in a title, what they refer to as drop in a title on if they have something that's like really big news or whatever. And we saw this a lot in from 2016 to 2020 because publishers had a lot of last minute drop in titles. A lot of them were, tabloid titles, things like that. Those can get published fairly quickly, but the majority of books, unless you have something that speaks to that audience, you're going to be waiting quite a long time. So if you have something that's really timely, I mean, it may make more sense to consider, going a different route too. So,
and I know you kind of led into this, but I think we still need to cover it for people that are wondering, do you have to get an agent if you want to work with a big publisher?
Most big publishers do not take unagented authors. Now, I have not been in the agenting landscape for a while. I haven't checked some of the bigger houses and what their terms are, but I cannot imagine that they have the bandwidth to vet everything that comes in. So, but there are a lot of boutique publishers that do extremely well. And I want to say that like 10 Speed Press, they publish some, I think they're primarily nonfiction, but they publish some great looking books. And they are, you can pitch them. They have guidelines right on their website. You can pitch them directly. And
what about the offshoots? Oh, go ahead.
Huh?
I was going to ask, because sometimes we've talked about this before off mic, but what about the kind of the offshoot smaller arms of some of these bigger publishers? Do they require agents as well?
How do you mean how do you mean the smaller arms of these publishers?
So we have, these big publishers will have smaller publishing houses underneath their brand that do specific projects, that might do specific genres. So, you're not actually getting published with Simon and Schuster, but you're getting published with one of their,
I see what you're saying. Yeah, typically, yeah. I mean, so typically what happens is that you might get published by one of the subsidiaries and then Simon and Schuster distributes your book. Or, you know what I mean? Or Penguin Random House distributes your book or something like that. So they become the distributor of record, but the smaller imprint, because publishers usually there was a time when I know a publisher that had like 25 different imprints. I don't know that they have as many now because again, I haven't agented in a million years, but typically, yeah, you can get published by a smaller. I thought what you were talking about for a minute was the publishers that have aligned themselves with independent houses that they have as one of their publishing arms.
Oh, got it.
You've heard about that, right?
Yes, tell them.
Because you and I have like vented about this. This is totally off script, people, just so you know.
I know.
But no, I mean, so what happened is that some publishing companies have aligned themselves with independent publishers who service authors who are wanting to publish independently. And I think we actually talked about this on a couple of shows ago, if memory serves. But so what happens is it gives kind of the impression that the author is being published by a big name publisher, even though it's still an independent press. So that's a whole conversation, and I'm pretty sure we got into it previously, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm sure.
Which means that you are still independently published. You were not published by that publisher. That became an outlet for them to send the many, 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 many manuscripts that would come across there, even though, you can't submit directly to a publisher. Sometimes I guess authors would just send their manuscripts, or they would get them from agents or something like that. That was an outlet for them. And sometimes it was great and sometimes it wasn't, because it also became a big revenue generator, right? And we've seen a lot of these authors who end up getting stuck in contracts with these offshoot kind of houses that are not helpful for them, I guess, for lack of a better term.
Exactly. Like the stifling contracts. So they're independently published, but without any of the benefits.
Without any of the benefits. That's a great way to put it. That is so fabulous. Yes. I need to put that on a coffee mug. Because the contracts are absolutely what you said. They are stifling. They stifle the author. So I think that, hopefully I didn't want to get too far down the rabbit hole with this, which obviously clearly I already did, but it's helpful, I think, to understand.
Yeah, I think that was a good rant. I think that was a great rant. That, when we go off script like that, sometimes the way it's circled back, because I think a lot of people that, again, are maybe in the position of like, I want to find an agent. I want to find a publisher. Okay, well, maybe this isn't what I want to do. They might end up getting funneled into one of these options that we ended up just ranting about, Penny. And now, they know what to look out for. They know to double check their contracts, things like that, just to make sure that they're still getting a fair deal and not just signing their book away for the sake of a name.
Well, and let me just say this again. I know we've said it a lot on this show. A lot of times authors want agents or they want big publishers because they don't want to do the marketing for their own book, and not because they don't want to do any of the work, because they don't really know where to start, which, believe me, happens a lot, right? Because there are a lot of options with marketing. The problem with that is that publishers do not, in most cases, market the books that they publish. I mean, some of them will do some small stuff, but the majority of them, they don't have the staff or the bandwidth to do the kind of marketing that most books need to get attention. So regardless of how you publish, you still have to market your own book. And I know we've probably said that 9 billion times since we've started doing this show, but that tends to be one of the arguments that I hear from authors. Like, well, I really want to find a publisher or an agent because I don't really want to do the marketing. It's like, well,
that's not the
answer. here's a little reality check, honey. I got to tell you.
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyway, so I hope that you have enjoyed. I know we sort of went off script and off tangent, but I hope that you have enjoyed the show. We love show ideas whenever you pop. In fact, we got a show idea just this week that I thought was really fabulous. So show ideas are always welcome. We love reviews wherever you listen to podcasts. And thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.